Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Kate Boyd. I'm a pianist and a professor of piano, and I'm really glad you're here. Today, I'm going to talk about sight reading resources for pianists. This video is part of a series of videos I'm doing right now about sight reading at the piano. In this video, I'm going to go over physical printed resources that you can use to practice your sight reading. And in a different video, I'm going to talk about online and digital resources because there are just so many resources out there. When you're sight reading a lot, you are burning through a lot of repertoire pretty quickly, and so you've got to always be looking for new things to sight read. I'm going to cover 3 categories today. Graded repertoire series, repertoire that has not been graded that you can just go out and find, and purpose-written sight reading resources. I've compiled some of these resources for you, and I've put a link in the description of this video, below this video, so you can feel free to go check that out. The first category I'm going to talk about is graded repertoire series. Graded repertoire series are compilations of music by various composers of pieces that are roughly the same level. These series start at an elementary level and go all the way through the advanced level. I really love repertoire series because they give you a lot of different types of pieces all at the same graded level. That's the work the editor of these series has done for you. They're great for sight reading because there's variety in each book and a lot of different examples to play. Also, you know when you're working from one book that all the pieces in it are at a similar level. This means that you can use one book for a while and not have to keep going out and finding music that's at your level, especially because you might not be sure if a piece is right for you to sight read until you actually start playing it and discover that it's too hard or too easy. I'm going to start off by talking about the Keith Snell repertoire series that are published by Neil A. Chose. Keith Snell has published 4 different series of books, and each series has 11 levels, starting with the primer level and then working level 1 through level 10 in each of the 4 series. And so that's a total of 44 books that you could use with plenty of repertoire in each one to work through. The 4 series are called Baroque and Classical Piano Repertoire, Romantic and 20th Century Piano Repertoire, Piano Etudes, and Essential Piano Repertoire, music from the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. The books contain standard selections by composers like Bach, Mozart, Haydn, and so forth. Another series that I really like is the J. Magrath Masterworks Classic series, published by Alfred Music. This series consists of 9 books. She has level 1 and 2 in 1 volume, and then there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, so that's 9 volumes. And similar to the Keith Snell, you have a mixture of different types of repertoire, different pieces, but they all tend to be at a similar level. Each book contains an index along with a suggested order of study, which is in a separate index. And that consists of a description of the musical and technical challenges in each piece. This is really handy because it can serve as a roadmap through the book, which is helpful for teachers and also self-learners. The other graded series I recommend a lot is the Celebration series from the Royal Conservatory, also known as RCM. RCM has published a series of piano repertoire books and a series of piano etudes that are leveled 1 through 10, so that's a total of 20 books. These books have a wide variety of pieces by different composers and in different styles, and they have more pieces by less standard composers than the other 2 series that I previously mentioned do. They have commission works, and they also include works in different styles. By the way, all the books I've mentioned up until now are also great compilations to use just for learning repertoire and picking pieces to learn to performance level. The way I recommend using these graded level books for sight reading is to identify your sight reading level, which is going to be different than your actual performance level for most people. You can look online in all of these books at the table of contents and see if any of the pieces you're currently playing or that you've recently played are there. And then that'll basically tell you the level of repertoire you're playing according to the editor of those volumes. Then go back 2 or maybe even 3 levels. So if you're currently playing a piece that is in the level 9 book, for example, the Keith Snell level 9 piano repertoire book contains the E major Bach Invention. Go back and then use the books for level 7 or even level 6. You want the experience of sight reading to be easy enough that you can actually make music as you sight read. You do not want it to feel like you're just stumbling through it note by note, or that you have to look at it hands separately before you can put it hands together. As I said before, learning to sight read well means that you need to play a lot of music. Of course, one way to practice sight reading is just go out and find a lot of music composed for the piano and sight read it. And so the second category I'd like to talk about is repertoire that you can find that isn't part of a graded series. One place to look is a music anthology. These are often arranged in chronological order, not necessarily in order of difficulty. So you'd look through the book and find pieces to read that you're in the mood to read that day and that you're interested in and that seem good for your level. Here are a few examples of anthologies you could use for sight reading. We have classics to moderns and we have easy classics to moderns. Now, when it talks about moderns, it means modern music, but these were compiled in the 1960s, and so it really doesn't go past any music from the 1960s. There's also beginning piano solos, which contains 132 original works. And we have the Pianist Treasury, which I just got as part of a donation at some point. There are just so many examples of anthologies. If you're a teacher, you can have books like these sitting around to lend to your students so they can work on their sight reading at home. I lend anthologies like that to my students pretty often. They work through a book over the course of a semester on their own, and then they give it back to me at the end of the semester. Now, sight reading practice isn't limited to just solo piano music. If you're a pianist, you want to get a head start on learning skills necessary for collaborative piano, like vocal accompanying, you can use an anthology of vocal music as a source for sight reading. So, like, here's a source of Schubert songs. There's also Italian aria anthologies and various other vocal anthologies. You could also sight read the piano part to duo sonatas, for example, Beethoven sonatas, Mozart sonatas, or you could get together with friends and sight read together with them. A really great free resource that a lot of people still aren't aware of is IMSLP, which stands for the International Music Score Library Project. This is a website where people upload scores that are out of copyright and therefore free to share. There's a huge amount of music on there. You can go to the IMSLP website, do a search, and then download music for free without it infringing on anybody else's copyright. So for sight reading, what you can do is choose a composer and work your way through a body of their work. The possibilities are limitless, but here are a few suggestions to get you started. Bach's Little Preludes, Bach's Inventions, Clementi Sonatinas, pieces by Burgmüller, Benda, Kuhlau, short pieces by Schubert, like his Momo Musico, moving into slightly more advanced repertoire, Mozart sonatas, Haydn sonatas, early Beethoven sonatas, and then going into Chopin nocturnes, shorter Brahms works, Bartók's Mikrokosmos, and so forth. I remember doing that a lot when I was an undergraduate. I would go and check a book out of the library and keep it for several weeks while I worked my way through it, practicing my sight reading. Another very effective and time-honored way to improve your sight reading is to practice hymns or chorales. You can get a hymnal like this, or you can download chorales from IMSLP. Reading music that is in 4-part harmony is harder than it might actually seem because you have multiple voices moving simultaneously and you have to track the motion of each voice and notice, is it moving stepwise up or down in relation to the others. Reading hymns and chorales helps you start to notice and remember chord shapes and patterns, which helps you not only improve your reading, but also helps you improve your ability to learn pieces quickly at the piano. The third category of resource I want to cover today consists of series that have been written specifically for learning how to sight read. I didn't start by talking about them because I really believe that the best way to learn to sight read better is to just do a lot of sight reading. But that method can be overwhelming for some people, and sometimes it's helpful to have more guidance in order to consciously improve your sight reading skills. This kind of resource is excellent for those who want to learn supplemental yet essential sight reading skills like rhythm and interval practice. There are a lot of excellent books out there for beginning pianists, such as the Piano Adventures sight reading books, but because I teach at the collegiate level, I'm focusing here on resources that also include options for more advanced players. If you struggle with sight reading, the Paul Harris Improve Your Sight Reading books are the ones I would recommend. There are 8 volumes in the series from early elementary through advanced. You can start with the book that represents your current level and work your way up from there. Each book has a practice chart where you can track your progress and includes 8 to 9 stages. If you do 1 stage a week, you can move through the book in a couple of months. Each stage includes rhythmic exercises, melodic exercises, and prepared pieces with guiding questions to help you scan the music before you play it, as well as a few solos. These books also have audio available online where you can check your performances against recordings. All of the playing examples in this series are composed by Paul Harris, as opposed to the earlier compilations I mentioned, which consists of pieces by a variety of composers. The sight reading selections are carefully constructed to be incremental, and each is geared towards a specific pedagogical goal. These are not pieces that you'll play in recital, as opposed to the earlier pieces I was telling you about, which could be recital pieces or sight reading practice. As you progress through the books, you'll encounter increasingly challenging musical elements such as key signatures, time signatures, dynamics, articulations. I like this series because it's very incremental, it's filled with really good examples, and it helps you improve at the ability to sight read intervallically and not just look at individual notes. Paul Harris also has a series of sight reading books called A Piece a Week, and he also has 2 volumes of Improve Your Sight Reading piano duets that could be nice for teachers to use with their students, because playing duets is a fantastic way to practice sight reading. Another well-known series I'm going to show you is the 4 Star Sight Reading and Ear Tests, a 10-book series from the Royal Conservatory. Each book is organized into exercises for the student to practice at home during the week, with tests for the teacher to give during lessons. For each day, there's a rhythmic exercise, preparatory observational exercises like looking for patterns or identifying tied notes, and a short musical excerpt to practice. The tests are in the back of the book for the teacher to give or for you to test yourself with. After you finish each book, you can progress to the next level. I should note here that the Royal Conservatory recently came out with an online subscription-based app for ear training and sight reading. I'm going to talk about that in my video on online sight reading resources. Another really fantastic sight reading tool that a lot of piano teachers love is the Piano Safari Sight Reading and Rhythm Cards. These are printed cards that each contain a melodic and rhythm exercise. There are 3 levels of the cards, and they're designed to go along with the Piano Safari repertoire books. The 6 color-coded levels correspond with the 6 units in each of those books. Now, those are great books, but you don't have to use the Piano Safari repertoire books to benefit from these cards. And they can be helpful even if you play at a relatively advanced level but struggle with your sight reading. What I find appealing about them is that they're effective yet simple, and they advance progressively. You can work on 1 to 2 cards per day, practicing the rhythmic exercise by counting out loud and clapping, and then scanning the melodic exercise before playing it. And if you're a teacher looking for a simple way to work with your students on sight reading in their lessons, you can identify each student's level within these cards and then keep track of it with like a Post-it note or something like that. And then from there, start every lesson by working on one of the cards together. Speaking of purpose-written progressive sight reading tools, there's a very good resource by Arnold Sartorio that's available on IMSLP, that website I mentioned earlier. It starts with easy exercises and goes progressively through more difficult ones. To find more sight reading resources on IMSLP, just type sight reading in the search bar and see what comes up. As you sight read, I want to give you a few words of advice. Try practicing your sight reading for about 15 minutes a day and go from there. When you sight read, play it a few times until you really feel like you kind of know it and it sounds like music to you. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is that they sight read something one time, but they might have only comprehended like half of it or less. And then they're like, well, I've already spoiled it because I've sight read it once. That's not how sight reading works. Sight reading is really all about micro-learning and speed learning something. The learning comes through the process of looking at the notes on the page and converting them to physical motions on the keyboard and music. And so the more you sight read, the better you get at processing musical notes very quickly. I've created a sight reading resource page where you can find some of the resources I mentioned in today's video. The link is going to be in the description below this video. I also made a free downloadable sight reading checklist. You can get your own copy of it by clicking on that link in the description below this video. The reason I made that resource was because when I work with my own students and their sight reading, I coach them through the things to look at in the music before they even play the sight reading selection. And so I put all of that onto a checklist. It talks about time signature, key signature, patterns, the rhythm, unusual markings, dynamics, articulations, and so forth. What I recommend doing is downloading it and then using it every time you sight read for a while until that checklist becomes an automatic part of your sight reading process. I made a video that's about the 4 biggest mistakes that I see people make when they practice sight reading at the piano, and you can watch that video by clicking right up there in the corner. I'll see you in the next video. Good luck with your sight reading and happy practicing.